Video game graphics are a topic of discussion that come up in two situations: when a Pokemon game comes out, or when any other Nintendo game comes out. Now, let's face the facts and admit that the Nintendo Switch is an underpowered console when compared to the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox line of consoles. That isn't up for debate, that's simply the facts. And when it comes to the actual games themselves, well, I'll be damned if Ratchet & Clank didn't look like 10 times more impressive than Super Mario Maker 2. Do people still play that game? Okay, let me be a bit more direct in my twisted analogies. Have you ever seen people complain about Pokemon? And the answer is yes, don't worry about that. But have you ever noticed that the graphics is one of the biggest complaints when talking about Pokemon? Like, at some points it feels like it's bigger than the potential issues that the story may have, the issues with the gameplay, the sound department, the possible bugs and glitches and game file corrupting issues any of these games may have. It's always style over function. It's always the wish for a 4K Gardevoir, but never the actual contents of the Gardevoir. Look at any game for the Switch and the same complaint will come up, really. And I feel like this has only worsened with the Steam Deck because a bunch of the games in there are on the Switch and I will argue look way better than the respective Switch versions. Now here's the thing, while it is fine to judge, criticize and straight up not like the graphics of a game, I feel like a lot of people who judge the value of games because it doesn't look the certain way that they will like and end up dismissing games because of the graphics, they're kind of missing the point here. At least it feels like it. In my 10:20 p.m. rambling ranting brain at the time of writing the script, it's very hard for me to formulate any coherent thoughts. So give me a second to Don't worry about that, I'm fine. Give me a second and I'll have a thesis statement just for you. You know, I was planning to record with the camera, but it's 11:50 p.m. at the time of recording the video and I don't feel like doing that. And now here's my super thesis statement. Video game graphics, while so susceptible to criticism, should not be overshadowing other areas that make the game stand out more, like the art direction and style. And constantly screaming for the best graphics encourages more lifeless corporate products than actually visually distinct products that deserve as much spotlight as the AAA best looking titles, and also can occasionally overlook the gameplay itself, and it also kind of discourages artistic freedom in some regards. But you know, that's just the minor points. I may make somebody mad, but let it be known that Terraria is still a more visually distinct game than most, if not all, of Ubisoft games. And AAA games in general, if you ask me. Now, before we do any discussion on the video game graphics and how good or bad they are, or how this Pokemon is truly like floating away into their home planet, let's remember that gameplay is more important than the graphics. Obvious, right? Well, look at the entire history of gaming for 1 second and you'll think otherwise. Ever since the beginning of time, whew, that's a lot of time, people have been aiming more with their eyes than with their mouths, especially when it comes to video games and new video game consoles. Especially with the rise of 3D consoles, during those times there were probably bounties for people who did so much as have 2D titles in their library. And really it hasn't changed that much. I still see a lot of people criticizing the graphics first and the game never. The journalist strategy. Now let me go back to the example of Pokemon, and this I remember clear as day because when Sword and Shield were first announced in like February all the way until its release in November, man, I hate pregnancy. All the way until release, there will be thread upon Instagram post, Tumblr discussion, YouTube video, basically every social media website imaginable simply complaining about the graphics of the game and immediately saying that the game was going to be bad. It ended up being bad, however that's besides the point. Now let's be fair here, the people didn't only have a problem with the graphics, they had a problem with a lot of other stuff like the actual mechanics and the whole National Dex controversy that's, I'm pretty sure that's like etched into like the back of the minds of like all Pokemon fans that were active on social media during those times. But I'll get into those things when I actually start speaking about Sword and Shield in an actual video, but that time hasn't come yet. The game, as I said, wasn't good. But the thing is that it wasn't bad simply because of the graphics that people complained about. Even if those graphics were so bad that people started gaslighting themselves into thinking that the Switch had as much power as the Wii because they can't run 3D big boy games properly. Don't be outrageous. Like, I just feel like Pokemon on the Switch sparked this stupid discussion again, am I wrong? Because I wasn't seeing any big discussions on graphics until the release of Sword and Shield became the catalyst for Twitter to start typing endless essays, and I know Twitter is in the center of the universe. We've already established that the Twitter-centric theory is... Just let me have this for a moment, please. I am very passionate about this topic for no reason whatsoever. And the thing is that every Pokemon game following Sword and Shield, and honestly every Switch game, have been getting pretty heavily criticized for the graphics when really... But you should be focusing on is where the game is fun to play. Pokemon Legends Arceus and Scarlet and Violet are some of the best games in the series, and they debatably look worse than some PS2 games. But that isn't the end-all be-all. Do you see what I mean? Now let's stop talking about Nintendo and let's start talking Nintendo again. You know what? Give me a second. I gotta go get some water. When it comes to these criticisms with the graphics, I always notice that they use games that look hyper-realistic. Have you ever heard that phrase? They should hire this guy, or the X franchise in Unreal Engine 4 videos. Yeah, they always say something like, why can Nintendo make video games that look like this? Ignoring the fact that some games simply don't need it, and I feel like it goes to the detriment of some other games. Have I mentioned that this is totally just like non-based on any information at all? For everything I know, I could be wrong on everything that I just said. It's just that I have seen a lot of these videos and images and posts, and I want to talk about them. Maybe I'm wrong as shit, but I still want to talk about them. You cannot tell me a Kirby game will look good on the US stuff as generic Unreal Engine math. I completely agree that some games may need the graphical upgrades, however simply making them more realistic, adding more textures and whatnot will not solve the issue. Look at Breath of the Wild, look at Mario Odyssey. Those games are absolute graphical marvels and still look better than a lot of the games that come out now. And the reason of why this happens is because they have style, they have unique styles. The art style makes the world come to life, not the amount of hair particles you put on Mario's hair. That's just a good bonus! Should Pokemon look better? Oh hell yeah it should, but it should look unique. Maybe a style like Crash Bandicoot 4, like a cartoony direction like that will fit the games perfectly, especially with the designs in like Crash Bandicoot. Actually, I'm imagining it'll actually look kind of sick, I think. It's just a shame that it'll never happen though. I don't know if it's just me. Don't answer or know I'm in the wrong here. But I feel like hyper-realism is kind of lame in video games. I feel like when you have the opportunity to introduce such unique art styles as unique as video games are capable of doing, and instead you do a game that has graphics making me think of another Call of Duty game, then I feel like there's an issue here. And before you say anything, there are a lot of Sony games that can be hyper-realistic. I love the art direction of the Horizon games, and God of War Ragnarok is one of the best looking games for a reason. And one of the most beautiful too. I'm not denying that. But what I am denying is saying that a hyper-realistic game is automatically more beautiful or better looking than other games because if the art style is very generic, then I'm sorry, but I don't care about your space game, Jeff Keighley. Artistic expression is very important in art, and when people say that the best looking games are games like these, I can't help but disagree. Alright, the video is almost done, you can almost go. But before that, let me just give one more example. One of my favorite video games is the first BioShock, and while it holds up visually today, what pushes it to be one of the best visually is the art style and the world design for the game. It's part of the core identity of BioShock, and chances are that many... Oh shit, I forgot where I was reading. And chances are, the game may have not been as remembered without it. Terraria has some of the best 2D pixel art in the history of the medium. It has stunning environments for a game that you can play in the X and Y axis. I am going insane here. Both of the Ori games are some of the most visually incredible indie games that I have ever seen. They are not hyper realistic, but the art style is so unique and detailed that it still manages to accomplish a beauty similar to it nonetheless. Speaking of indie games, a lot of indie games have managed to push the barrier on what's possible with 2D art, managing to accomplish beautiful art that would have never been possible before, some of them rivaling some of the best looking landscapes in, well, any game. Okay, this part is going to be a bit more unscripted than the last, even if the last was already going a bit off the script, because I just completely forgot to write anything for this section, so my apologies. I feel like it's very sad when games that have such unique art styles, like, for example, Tearaway and Gravity Rush, both Sony games by the way, I don't know if that's a coincidence, but just keep that little fact in there. It's a real shame that games like these, that are so good, not only gameplay wise but also visually, fail, both in the PS Vita, which, I mean, that was kind of granted, however, also when it releases on a more successful console, because it just feels like unique games, nah, we don't want those, we want The Last of Us. The Last of Us again. Fuck me, man. I don't know. Take another third-person, over-the-shoulder, hyper-realistic game where you're exploring with your body. Sony does that a lot now that I think about it. It's just like, I feel when that game like this fails, I feel like it gives the developers the wrong idea. A new Rayman game fails? No, it doesn't mean that you need to release another Tom Clancy game. Just means that you have to like market it better to the right audience. But that's another entire discussion, but like it also kind of links with this one. It's weird. The pure creativity that flows from video games as a whole is what makes video games so special to the people who play them. So why limit yourself to simply looking like a movie when you can transcend, you can go far and beyond? That is what I'm trying to say. Don't simply try to look like another realistic game. Try to go beyond that. Try to push past that. Try to become more. Try to become something else. Try to be yourself. Did this rant make any sense whatsoever and was coherent in any meaningful way? Probably not. However, I did want to talk about this because I find it very interesting, at the same time a bit frustrating that people obsess so much over like games to looking hyper realistic and whatnot, and I just wanted to quickly talk about it. Is it going to matter in the grand scheme of things? Probably not, but well, you know, sometimes you just gotta speak your mind on stuff to like, you know.